Hi everyone, and welcome to eCore's a webinar in partnership with Tempo. I'm Clara Malman, part of eCore North American marketing team, and I want to welcome you all on today's session, Align, Adapt, Achieve, Mastering SPM with Tempo, Software, and Jira. By the end of the session, we're going to have a Q&A, so please remember to submit your questions during the presentation. Now, I will give the word to Dan Teixeira from eCore and Jeremy Stark from Tempo. Dan, Jeremy, the floor is all yours. Thank you all.
Thank you, Clara. Really excited to be here. Really excited to be here with Jeremy to help present to you guys the master of SPM, mastering SPM, excuse me. My background and myself, I've been in the strategic portfolio management space for over 10 years. Started by changing a large-scale program management office at a health insurance company about 10 years ago and beginning to convert that into more agile, iterative nature of working into assisting over the years many organizations in the adoption of strategic portfolio management and the adoption of agile as a whole as well. Jeremy, I'm really proud to be presenting with you. Do you want to give a little bit of introduction to yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Dan and Clara. Jeremy Stark. I'm the product manager for enterprise here at Tempo, which means I'm working on the integrations between all of the products that we have as they relate to strategic portfolio management. And I'll be working with Dan on the presentation, and I'm going to give you a demonstration of some of the stuff that we've done here at Tempo to support SPM level solutions for your organization. Thanks, Dan.
Awesome. I've really loved seeing the progression of Tempo. I think the star of the show is going to be some of the demos that we give before. But let's first talk about a little bit of some of the other aspects of how do we actually implement this? How do we strategically place it together? So what we hope out of this webinar, what we're really hoping that you get a grasp onto is a real tactical implementation on how strategic portfolio management gets implemented specifically within your organization. We see this as kind of a buzzword right now, and so we wanted to give you a little bit of some common and some practical usage on how to get there. We also think that obviously with any new concept, there's going to be objections that come into it, and we're going to talk about some of those objections and how you overcome them and how you overtake them. And also then, as we mentioned with Jeremy, talk about some really adaptable and modular pieces that Tempo brings into their solution and how the maturity and the adoption rate with that can help you throughout. So let's talk about how you prepare. And like any challenging thing that you're heading forth, there's preparation to this and making sure that we're sensing challenges and obstacles that come ahead is going to be a critical piece to this. So we're going to start with a quick poll, and Claudia's going to kick this off in just a minute. But the question really here are, where do you see your top portfolio problems? What kind of things are you seeing facing your organization, and what challenges do you see within the organizations within the portfolio space? Could be a misalignment of goals, resource optimization, the transparency into work, and kind of this push away from the rigors of projects, or maybe it's something else that you're seeing. We'll give you another 10 or 15 seconds to provide some input on that. Claudia, you can close that out whenever you think you're ready. All right, so mainly seeing, as you guys are seeing the results, misalignment of goals has really been a critical element to it. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And I think resource optimization. Now, I use the word resource here, and I'm not just speaking of a person. So that's a key thing. We don't want to back to the kind of empathy part of agility and empathy part of working. We're not just talking about resourcing here. We're talking about multiple aspects of everything that's needed to optimize. So thank you for that. Let's talk about some of the problems that we see typically within organizations. And it is exactly the first bit that all of you have voted on, and that is the misalignment of projects and agile team-based work to the strategic objectives and strategic initiatives within the organization. And this misalignment does not have to be this exact traceability matrix, because then it does limit innovation. We want our teams to be innovating. We want our teams to be thinking of the things that we haven't thought about, and that they bring forth the ideas that are forth. But we also want to make sure that we're giving that alignment back and saying, is that innovation still aligned to where we're going, and that we don't innovate into the incorrect space coming through. Also, that empowerment of teams that we're going to be talking a lot about, that has to come with some sort of guidance. Empowerment without guidance creates a madness cycle coming through. And so making sure that we have that vision as to where we're heading, and then saying, innovative team, where do you think that that's going to come into? This yields right into the second bullet that we talk about here, which is really a lack of a visibility into the progress of work, and a lack of a visibility into the results that were beginning to be achieved. And this is one of the more critical aspects that comes in when we begin consulting with many organizations. The number one pain point that they have is, I don't even know if my organization is doing the right thing, let alone if the progress they're making. I don't even know if they're organized or doing the right type of work into there. And we want to do that, as we'll talk about in a bit, with not creating rigorous processes throughout, but with bringing a level of autonomy to the team, and then roll up visibility so that we know that we're working on the right things. We also know that things change. The one constant is that things will always change and adapt in it through. And so we want to create some level of a change and resource management process. And I'm not talking about a traditional change control here, but an ability that we understand that if a team pivots, if insights come in, how quickly can an organization adapt and change? So can we, in a well-organized way, see a change and see that change come about differently as well? Last bullet here, myself and Jeremy had a lot of conversation as we were preparing with this one, and I'm just going to read it because I'm really liking the statement that we've created. It is process diversity yielding to team autonomy with portfolio visibility. And I think this really summarizes a lot of the topics that we've talked about here. We're not talking and implementing an SPM solution of this rigid, thou shalt follow all these rules, and as a result to get data up and hinder the ability to innovate and to have a team autonomy. What we're talking about in the Tempo suite of tools really helps accelerate this, is truly understanding how a feature team works, how a subcomponent team works, how a legacy team may be hindered and work in a different way, how maybe a business or an HR team works differently from a software development team, and allowing them to have their autonomy to do their magic in their own way, but then still having that visibility report up so that we can have the right data to make decisions, the right visibility, the right guidance down, and also the right insight to tell that team, hey, you did an amazing job in what you're working through. So I'll just repeat it again because we think it's really an important one. Process diversity yielding to team autonomy with portfolio visibility. I think if there's one thing that's going to be reoccurring in this webinar, that is the line item. So what problems is your organization facing, and what is the most important thing that you're looking to have solved within this space? As I mentioned before, we don't want to just implement strategic portfolio management for the sake of implementing it. We want to take what we're calling here a return on investment approach. And through that, we want to first understand what are the biggest concerns that you're facing at the moment. What are the biggest hurdles whether they be external or internal, that your organization is facing. And then we want to look for parts of an SPM solution that will enable us to get to that and get to that insight, get to that data point. You don't want to implement this in a big or bang approach, but you want to make sure that it's iterated at a way that you see that return on investment, or at least some leading indicators on your implementation that yields to value. Jeremy, I think you wanted to add some insight into this piece. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, well, there's so many places I could come in at this point. But I do want to just go back to the other slide on the process diversity point, because here at Tempo, and probably we've been talking to the partners, there's a situation the market is in where for the past 20 some odd years, we've been making massive investments in agility at the team level. And that, depending upon your perspective, but it's been massively successful at the team level to up visibility into what teams are doing and to improve the output that teams can deliver with short iterative cycles, open to inspection, forced rank priorities, like all the things that Agile brought that maybe we now sort of take for granted, really transformed team level engineering. And where Agility's had more mixed results is when they try to scale that, because the empowerment of teams means there's going to be some process drift naturally over time as teams locally optimized around the conditions that they're working in. And then when you say, great, let's scale, the simple approach is to just sort of flatten the process frameworks at the team levels to maybe rallying around the teams that are super excited about their process, or the ones that stand out as best practices and so forth. But it does naturally create these resistance loops from other teams that are like, hey, we've invested a ton of energy in getting good, and now we need to undo that in order to feed sort of a monolithic system. So that tension's been there at scale with agility, from the mid 2010s and on, as scaled frameworks really started to pick up. And at Tempo, we're focused on really preserving that investment that we've made at the team level agility. So allowing some of that process diversity to exist while still allowing the organization to roll up data, and middle management, PMOs, project managers, really enabling them to do the work in a process diverse environment without having to get into the internal details of how each team works, having the tools figure that out, really kind of be a tool and leverage the tooling to unify the process at the mid-level that then creates that reportability up to the management layer. And I can show you some of that in the demo, but that's our approach. We spent a lot of 2023 leveraging the flexibility we have in our portfolio and really struggling to preserve it as we brought these higher level strategic capabilities to our portfolio. So that piece on what you mentioned around process diversity, which is important for adoption, meeting people where they are and getting them on board without requiring too much change that it's going to be an overwhelming shock to the system. And what you're talking about here with the what are the biggest needs and concerns, when you're gathering that previous slide you had, when you're gathering like what are the things that we'd like to address within this organization, you can approach it from, hey, what's the biggest thing that's hindering us, and also what's the biggest opportunity for success. So you might have a PMO group that's really struggling to stay on top of projects, or you might have a PMO group that's really killing it, but their tooling really isn't helping them, and it's more work than really is sustainable. And that's a great opportunity to go, hey, let's start here where there's a team that's really engaged, super supportive of change processes. Let's get a success in this area first before trying to go out to the rest of the organization and do this change all at once. So that's really the modular approach. And I can speak to that as well in the demo.
Really insightful. And I'm gonna just a quick insight of my progression. As I mentioned before, I've been working in strategic portfolio management and agile adoption for the past 15 years. I am an SPCT, which means that I've done a lot of work within the scaled agile framework. When there's many perceptions around the scaled agile framework around it being rigid and all those pieces. I mean, really what it is it's a collection of best practices that in your adoption of it, you have to look at the expectation and results that you're looking to achieve, and then use those concepts sporadically and not necessarily all the time in that space. About 10 years ago, when tools weren't but Tempo's suite of tools weren't where they are today, and others weren't, I used to tell organizations when I was helping them through change, forget the tool. Let's use stickies on a wall, because the tool would create so much rigidity in what we're doing. It wouldn't allow me to say, no, don't use that process. We don't need that now. From a change management perspective, let's just focus on this. And it's interesting, and I just had this observation as you were literally speaking, that we would shy away from tools because of that. And I think the progression specifically of Atlassian's suite of tools and what Tempo's doing with their SPM solution has allowed us to now pair these things together. And I think it's really, really an interesting space to be at. So thank you for that. So let's move forward a little bit. So what outcomes do you hope to achieve? So we talked about the problems. We talked about the areas that we see as opportunities. And these will be, you'll start to see some of the results coming through. It really that alignment of strategic goals to the work, so that people understand what they're working on. We have that connection. We can make that pivot. If there is market trends that change, we could understand where that lines through and make the adjustments. Look towards resource and productivity optimization, and look to have those things so that we could look at and say, where can we optimize? Where is our money being spent properly? And then every organization right now is looking for data to make the proper decisions. The decision-making cycle within a enterprise at the strategic portfolio level used to happen yearly. It now, I would argue, it happens weekly. If not, in some organizations that are a little more regulated, monthly. It's happening more frequently that we have to adjust to what's going on in the market, what's going on within technology suites. And these decisions no longer can be made on wild guesses. They have to be made on, how is that product getting to market? How quick are we to get that to market? What is the client's perception? What is the consumer's perception of it? What is the adoption rate of it? All of that data has to feed into here so that we know what to yield through. And the result of the market constantly switching is that iterative planning has to take place to get the maximum value. And so we do have to, still back to those teams and everything we're speaking with them, enable more iterative aspects of what the teams are facing, and more iterative aspects of ways of working, while still providing the visibility that we desire. So some of the data that we're seeing from outside, not just ours, we're looking at really an increased amount of transparency. The studies show here from PwC, 81% claim to conduct transparency and have better visibility into things. We're also looking at a higher, kind of a decent rate of success in adoption of SPM tools, and better decision making that comes out of them, because that data is now available and readily available to them to make those decisions. So how do we approach it? Now, some of you may be looking at this slide and saying, Dan, it's not this simple. It's not just 4 steps that are there. We're going to go into a little more detail, but I want to just talk about the high level concept of the approach. It really is engage your stakeholders, figure out what their pains are, what their problems are, what they're looking to do, drive a solution to support them, implement that solution, and establish a change management plan. I want you all to think about the examples that you've had right now, just in your head, of trying to implement this. I guarantee at the simplest level, you've defined the wrong solution, possibly. Not engaged the critical stakeholder that ended up coming in and killing the whole idea. Not created the proper change management plan to support adoption. As simple as this is, these are typically one of the 4 areas where we see that people end up tripping up or failing in their iteration. The other thing, and Jeremy, we've talked about this a lot. This isn't linear. We put it here linear, but it really is not also iterative in that nature. It's really a bunch of small little jolts like this because we want to build the solution in a way iteratively, but make sure in every iteration we do each of these steps that are coming forth.
Yeah, and when I saw this slide, if you think about this in terms of modularity, you can break down the massive task of deploying SPM potentially across multiple departments, regions globally, and so forth into these, it's really as small an iterative step as you think you can handle. And really the scoping of the step is what stakeholders can you get in a room and define a solution that they're going to adopt. And that stakeholder step is important because you want to get everyone necessary to make a decision in the room at the beginning so that they're aligned and a part of the solution development and they feel a stake in it. The other thing I want to say here, and this might be a little tangential, but not everyone in the organization is a change agent. And you don't want your solution to be only engaged with the people who are ready to go and only be supportive of them, because there's a lot of people who just don't like change. And that's fine, because not everyone, they hold the culture of the organization, but they're going to need that change management plan, which often isn't really done well, to account for people who really need to be aligned to the solution. They didn't want to be part of the development of the solution. They might have provided some insight, but they're not the ones out there gunning for change. They're the ones who are going to be like, well, I used to do it this way, I've always done it this way, and so forth. They're going to need a lot of support. And so that change management material is important for them and important for the success of the adoption of the solution.
That's awesome. Let's be honest. None of us like change. I think some of us adopt it a little more and are a little more eager towards it because we see it. But at the end, we've got to see some of those results. Let's just go a little deeper on each of these just real quick. We talked about it, identifying stakeholders. Jeremy hit on it spot on. Don't just talk to the people that love what you're going to put together. Gather insights from the biggest naysayers or the biggest people that have influence. And don't come to them screaming, we're going to implement strategic portfolio management. They won't care about that. Gather insights from them to understand what challenges do they see? What are the pains that they're feeling on a daily basis? And then educate them on what certain practices within strategic portfolio management can get you towards. Also, set the expectation. There's no silver bullets anymore anywhere that solve all problems. So we need to eliminate that and be clear that we're going to implement this to solve this portion of that solution. I think, getting the right tools and process together is really important. It helps from an adoption perspective. It also helps from just not missing particular parts that we assumed were done a specific way, but done differently. So do the proper tool evaluation, do the proper tool road mapping to see when you're going to adopt specific pieces, because it isn't all a big bang approach, but also look to how are we going to adjust and adapt the processes as well. Do a process map of the existing processes that you have. Look for the failure points, the change, the kind of areas in which you could improve upon, and seek to put not only a tool in that place, but a process and behavioral change in that place as well. Follow through with an implementation plan. First choose an MVP. Do not go at this at a big bang approach. I have way too many. Before I started implementing, I had a full head of hair. After so many big bang approaches, I've gone completely bald at this point through the stress level of it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. We need to iterate but make sure that MVP, as we talked about, goes back to the value a stakeholder's looking to achieve, because then you'll change a naysayer or a bystander into a champion. Not everyone's going to be a champion, but you could change that, implement that, and make sure you have a roadmap that also tells people, and this protects against just not MVPing it to the nth degree. It shows that, hey, we have a space in which we're going to. We're going to get an optimal solution out of this thing, but we're starting with an iterative approach to solve these problems, and later we look to adopt these things to solve the other ones. Many times without that implementation roadmap, people just think you're wildly roguing upon building something and you don't have that strategy behind it. So make sure that you have that roadmap. And then the most critical piece: train, communicate, and look to continuously improve. People won't just gravitate towards things because you built the fancy thing, right? They need to be trained not only on a user training on the tools, but a mindset training, a process training to make sure that they're using the tools with the right insights and the right spaces to adopt into new ways of working. Make sure that you communicate and overly communicate, informing people that this is the change going through. It's going into production now. Here's the value that was achieved. I highly recommend later on after implementation doing regular kind of monthly demos or showcases of, we implemented this, here's the value it's creating later on. Or here's the things we found out that we aren't using anymore, and we're going to stop doing that. So that kills processes that have lasted far too long in our organizations. And then the last cycle is really look towards continuous improvement. Whatever we thought was going to be the second thing because of some pain, maybe the pain was resolved from another reason or because of the first implementation. So look constantly towards that eye of continuous improvement and also evaluating what's the pain of the day. So we've talked a lot. Here's a little bit more on the expected results. I think we've hit on the strategic alignment, operational efficiency, of moving out that waste, pushing through agility, improving on decision making, and constantly pushing towards continuous improvement. And all of you on this webinar now are now saying, Dan, please stop with the slides and let's see the tool. So let's move towards that space. A single tool won't solve all of your problems. That's a guarantee. And what I'm honored to bring next is Jeremy to showcase to us the suite of tools that we have within Tempo to help solve that. So take it over to you, Jeremy.
Sure. Give me a moment here. Well, I, for one, was enjoying the slides. A lot of rich content there. So thank you for that, Dan. So yeah, I'm going to walk you through what Tempo has been up to really the past year, integrating a lot of products that we acquired. I came to Tempo through the Structure acquisition. So I'm an old school Structure person and have been working on really turning Structure into a data platform that underlies a lot of the stuff that I'm going to show you. Here we're looking at RoadMonk, which is our strategic road mapping application that really sits sort of at the tip of the spear for our SPM. You don't need to start here. You could start, for example, with Structure, managing your projects and programs and so forth. You could start with just time management to get a handle on where time is going at the staff level, and then make some decisions about what other things you might want to add to gain additional insights into how the organization is running. But I'm going to do the sort of traditional strategy to execution flow here. So we'll start with RoadMonk, which is built from the ground up for doing strategic planning. And that's another thing that I like about Tempo's approach is we have these modules for the SPM system that are built from the ground up for the personas that are using them. So for example, Jira has generally been pretty great for tech teams, but not great for organizational leadership to go in and understand what's going on strategically, certainly not understand what's going on technically. So moving them out of that environment and giving them sort of a world of their own to do that strategic planning is what RoadMonk is about. So here we're looking at a very fleshed out roadmap in RoadMonk. I'm just going to quickly walk you through some of the areas of RoadMonk. So this is a roadmap that we've been working on. We'll come back to this. I'm going to click and just go to RoadMonk sort of console where I'm now looking at my roadmap. So these are the ones that I've created and I'm the owner of. I can get some roadmaps that have been shared with me that I'm collaborating with some people on. We can see the people that are involved with those roadmaps there. We can create teams of people and then create team focus groups for doing collaborative work on roadmaps. We've got a new collections ability, and here you can kind of do a little bit of organizational design. Like if you've got a bicycle division and a car division and an aerospace division, you might set up some collections that represent that and put those roadmaps and portfolios in those specific collections. Roadmap can do portfolios. So here's where you can aggregate a bunch of roadmaps together. And I'll talk a little bit about that with the integration capabilities of Roadmap, where we can integrate to a bunch of systems and then bring it all together at the strategic level. And Roadmap comes with a bunch of great templates to just sort of get you started. Roadmap's got a lot of experience with road mapping, and they've sort of taken that and put some best practices in place. If you want to just get a quick kickstart with a roadmap, you can just select a template, take a look at it, see if it's going to fit your needs, and then base your roadmap on that with the example items or without them. It also has an idea management capability. Here, you can actually create portals that are publicly accessible and gather feedback on specific product categories, do some prioritization of them in some various different ways, and then flow those into the roadmap items so that you have some justification and some market validation for the things that you're doing. All right, so let's get back to our roadmap here. So the road mapping itself is very straightforward in Roadmap, and this is a huge feature that I like to just highlight, is that it's very easy to just add data to a roadmap and then start using it. So when you're doing spends at this level, which is basically quarter over quarter level spends, tens of millions of dollars potentially, you'd be surprised at sort of the sparseness of the data that governs it when they're putting this stuff together. Like the executives might just talk about widget 2.0 or launch New York City, and that represents millions and millions of dollars worth of spend. Everyone kind of knows what it's about. There's a lot of justification for it, but it's a real shorthand for talking about a bunch of big things they're trying to get done quarter over quarter or for the year. So here we can just add a new item, and there's no additional stuff we need to do. It's just on the roadmap now. And I can go and say, give it a date that I want to see this stuff happen, apply that, and there's nothing else I need to do. Now that's shareable, people sort of understand what it is, and we can start to fill out the data as more stuff comes in. And this should be a fairly familiar data view if you use Jira at this point, because you can get this view from a bunch of different products, including structure. So there is a hierarchy here of big things we want to get done and what they get broken down into. And we can add in custom fields in Roadmap to sort of flesh out the initiative that we're engaged in. Here we have things like executive sponsor, the driver for the project, the investment areas that this touches on, and the team that may or may not pick this up. We can then take this data and put it in the timeline view. You can see here we can have items on the same row, which is actually kind of a big thing, because in Jira, a lot of the structures force you to put each item on its own line, and it's not very roadmappy. Here, this is designed specifically for this kind of view, and you can just put this stuff around wherever you want it to be. If I want to take this item and move it out and maybe drop it here on the same line, not a problem. Stretch it out. Just very quick movements. Sorry, I actually clicked on it. Very quick movements that allow you to just assemble a strategic plan, make it visible, get agreement at the high level before you then move it into Jira for implementation. So a couple other views. Let's just take a look at us. So Roadmap has two primary views. Here's the timeline view, where we have categorization on the left. Here I've got it by priority, and then timelines on the top. I can select how I want to show these timelines. So we can do it by months, quarters, halves, things like that, really to make the communication align with how the audience is talking about it. Let's go to the other primary view, which is the swim lane view, where you're kind of taking two categories and combining them into some story about what's going on with the roadmap. Here I have investment areas across the top and the priorities. So this is just a quick way to go, yeah, cardholder happiness, we have a high priority project there. If I want to pull in the sub items, can just click, and that one doesn't have any, but can click and pull in the sub items for these projects, but I can also just collapse it down to the big things that we're trying to do. And this can sort of act as an agenda for a bi-weekly or monthly meeting with stakeholders and leadership, where we just walk through the high priority and medium priority items. And if we have questions, you can drill into the cards and so forth to answer them. So let's say that we've designed this roadmap. We've got to a point where the stakeholders are like, yep, let's go. Let's make this happen. So here's where traditionally Roadmonk has struggled, because Roadmonk is not an execution environment. So we're going to go into Jira, which is definitely an execution environment. And we're going to connect directly into the structure product that that Tempo has. And this is going to greatly simplify the integration into Jira and make it really seamless. And it's not going to require any technical expertise to get this data into Jira, start managing it, and then pull the status back up into Roadmonk. So I want to show you that Roadmonk does have integrations into a bunch of other products, including Azure DevOps and Pivotal Tracker and Monday.com. We have a direct to Jira integration. So you can go direct to Jira's APIs, but I'm going to demonstrate the direct to structure integration, because that's really sort of the seamless, non-technical approach to getting this data in there. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's pull up the structure integration wizard. Let's walk through it. So it's multi-instance. So now with cloud, organizations generally have several Jira instances, probably in production, that they're using. And with Roadmonk, you can decide which instance you want to represent this roadmap in and put it there. You could have other roadmaps in different instances. Like I said, you can gather them together into a portfolio and see across all of your instances, and potentially other products like Monday or Azure or Pivotal in the same portfolio and manage across all of these systems in Roadmonk. So we're just going to select our demo instance of Jira. The question we ask you is, you want it public or private? We don't really need to ask this. We could really just click and go. But if this is a roadmap that has sensitive material in it, you don't want to share it broadly, you'd set to private and then elevate the privileges as needed once inside of Jira. We'll just leave this public and we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and tell it to give us a structure with the hierarchy that we've created in Roadmonk, so we can start assigning work to the various parts of the roadmap. So this will take a moment to come up. Zoom this out. So a couple things have happened here. One is the structure has been populated with all of the roadmap items that we created inside of Roadmonk. It's also created in structure. And if you're a structure user, this should be familiar. If you're not a structure user, I'll do a little bit of explanation here. The dates for these items have become an initial baseline in structure Gantt, indicating to the project manager when this item is desired. So when I'm doing my planning, I have some indication of when the desired target date is for these items, and I can plan accordingly, which I'll show you in a moment. So I also want to highlight that there's likely a persona change here. When you're talking about SPM level solutioning, you're working across personas in the organization and persona groups in the organization. So we've transitioned now from sort of a leadership persona group working in Roadmonk to now PMO project managers who have been assigned a roadmap, potentially running several quarters to go make that happen from an execution perspective. So now let's say I'm a project manager and I've been handed this roadmap maybe 9 a.m. Monday morning, and I can see the items. I have a link back to the roadmap here, so I can go see what's going on in Roadmonk and get all that context. But I want to start moving work into this roadmap so that we can start getting it done. So there's several ways to do this. I'm going to show you one way in structure, which is to pull up a second structure on the right. And as a project manager, I have a structure that I keep as my own that has all of the teams that I work with across probably many projects that I'm working on. And what I can do is just tree out and get a look at their work and say, I know that this work is necessary for this part of the roadmap, and I can just drop it in. Maybe this work is also necessary, and I can just drop that in. And what you'll see is structure starting to light up the status, the progress, right up through the top of the roadmap. So I can already start to report a little bit about what's going on with the work in Jira as it relates to the roadmap in RoadMonk. And I'll show you later how this syncs up to RoadMonk. Let me just check time. Okay. I'm going to try to do this quick. I'm going to move along pretty quick now because I want to leave time for Q&A. The other thing, I'll just add in a little bit more work here from an Android group. So let's move this in. And I want to call out a couple things that have happened here. And this gets to sort of the flexibility that we're talking about, is I've just dragged work into a roadmap from 2 different projects in Jira without having to think about it. I've just been making business decisions to move work where it needs to be, and Structure's just doing the right thing with that work. I've also moved in 2 different ticket hierarchies. Let's say iOS is a Scrum team and they just use epics and stories, but Android's maybe in a safe environment and they use safe epics and so forth, taller hierarchy. Well, Structure's just going to move all that stuff in and do the right thing with it, rolling it up and so forth. So there's a flexibility there. We don't have to talk to the teams about their processes, their workflows, or their ticket hierarchies. We can just work immediately with what they're doing and get that stuff into this roadmap. So another thing I want to show is, let's go open up the Gantt. And this is a demo environment, so a lot of this has already been sort of worked out and specified in terms of linkages and so forth. But let's just say we've done some planning, and this is the end result of our planning. And we can see here the work is way out to the right. I can look at my original baseline, and it can tell me we're going to be 19 weeks late. I can now communicate that to management. They can make decisions about whether or not they want to reallocate resources or de-scope or pull any of the levers that are typical when you're in that situation and move that date in. The other thing I can do is pull up the resource panel in Structure. And here I want to show you another integration that we've done with Tempo. And that is we've integrated Structure with Tempo Planner. And so what this does is Structure traditionally uses its own internal resourcing, which is per structure. Meaning if you're trying to scale Structure throughout the organization, structures that are making conflicting resource assignments, you wouldn't see them visible. But with the Planner integration, if I go into Planner mode, now we're pulling from a central resource capacity planning tool, which is Tempo Planner, and Structure's gaining the benefit of organizational insight into resource allocations. So if I make an allocation here in this structure on this roadmap, another project manager will see that for their roadmap, and Structure will visualize all that. So let's go back to just the Gantt view, because I want to show you another piece of flexibility that we have, which is I said that iOS is a Scrum team, but this isn't looking very Scrum. So let's go in and support iOS's Scrum workflow and allow, let's say, Android to continue in their more Kanban style process flow. So I'm going to go into Gantt, and I'm going to create a slice of work for iOS that is going to treat them like a Scrum team instead of a Kanban team. So I'll just do JQL here, and anything coming from the iOS project. In this organization, let's say each team gets its own project, might be different in your organization. However they select their work is what you would do here. So we'd say project in iOS Scrum. And what we're going to do is we can now override how Gantt is interpreting their data. So I could do different work estimates for them, which would affect the scheduling. I can do progress calculations specifically for how they calculate their progress. But all we're going to do here is we're going to override the scheduling. So rather than using start date and due date, we want to use their sprints, and we always want to use their sprints. And the sprint board they use is the iOSS board. And let's just go ahead and create that slice and save that off. And in a moment, Gantt is going to snap these tasks to match what's going on in their sprint. So I can see here, here's the sprint that is in. I can see across the top the sprints that they have. And as a project manager, if I try to drag this between sprints, it's going to deny that. It's going to say, hey, this needs to either be in sprint 2 or 3. You can't put it between the sprints. So I would select which one I want, and it would snap it to that sprint. So here we are respecting their grooming, their sprint planning, and their process. And as a project manager, I'm locked into that, and I don't need to do a lot of thinking because Structure is going to provide those guardrails for me. in how they plan. But down below, we have Android, and they are doing, say, Kanban or just a waterfall approach, and I can work with their work as they do. So we've taken this roadmap from RoadMonk, got it into structure. We're able to do planning and respect team process. We're able to do global capacity planning using the planner integration to coordinate across roadmaps. Now I want to get some visibility into what's going on inside this structure. And that's where we have some really cool things that we've done here at Tempo. And I want to show you the next thing here, which is I have this pre-built custom charts roadmap dashboard. And custom charts is our in Jira reporting solution for SPM. So I'm pulling up the dashboard I've done in custom charts. And what I'm going to do is edit the data widget. So this widget that I'm looking at right now pulls in the data that we care about and then feeds it to all the charts on the dashboard. So if I change the data here, all the charts are going to change to match the data. And the cool thing that we've done is added the ability to use a structure as a data source. So if you look at other charting tools, if you looked at custom charts last year, you'd be able to do the normal stuff. Pull in a project, pull in a save filter, or write some JQL. Well, now you can just use a structure. So what I'm going to do is not use that structure and instead use the structure that we just were working in and save this off. And what's this whole dashboard is going to do is now start tracking that structure. So as things change in that structure, all these charts will update and give people visual visibility into what's going on inside that structure. Provided I save it. Yep, there we go. So now as the states change, as the assignments change, as whatever it is you choose to visualize here changes, people can go here rather than having to dig through the data in the structure to sort of get a handle on what's going on. The other piece I'll show you is, and this is the last piece I'll show you, and I'll hand it back to Dan. Let's go over to Tempo land. Let's go to cost tracker. And let's say as a project manager, I know the budget and I want to start tracking the cost for this project. The scope that I'm going to use is, again, we now have the ability to, cost tracker has the ability to pull from a structure. So I'm going to use the structure that links to that roadmap in RoadMonk. I'll just give some default hourly costs so that we get some data, and hopefully we will see at least an interesting chart. Yep, there we go. And I can now go in here and set my budget and maybe tweak my cost rates for various contractors or teams or whatever, and start managing this from a financial perspective. So what I like about this is that we have this 100% guarantee of the right data between structure, between cost tracker, between the visuals that you're doing in reporting, and between the executive level strategic management tool in RoadMonk. We know it's the right data because we're managing it in structure. And structure is a very highly curated, visible tool for doing that kind of data management. It's active and it's what matters in the moment. So you have access to very current and live data that then flows into these tools and gets processed in different ways to give you the kinds of information you're looking for: financial, status, project management, or strategic. Let's just bounce back to RoadMonk for a moment. Actually, let's bounce back to structure. I want to do one more thing, which is, let's say that we've done all this planning in structure. And the best we can do is what we have here. We want to change the dates in RoadMonk to match what we have here. The way that we handle this in our SPM is to have RoadMonk track those baseline dates that it gave us. And if something changes to the point where we need to actually update the strategy, we have in structure, we create a new baseline in structure and RoadMonk will update to that baseline. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a new baseline. This is the new plan. And this would be done after aligning leadership, management, and the teams. And you'll see now we have a new baseline snapped to the items where they are, which is now the new plan. And if we go back to RoadMonk, let's go to the timeline, because that'll be more interesting, and refresh it. What we'll get is a little refresh spinner here, and then it's pulling in the data, that first data. It's going to actually pull in a bunch of different data, but you can see it snapped to whatever is going on in structure, which is probably a little crazy because we really didn't do planning. but now it's tracking, again, the updated plan in structure. And of course, there will be plan drift week to week that may or may not affect the strategic outlook. We can let that happen, but only if it gets critical enough where we need to replan do we then need to go in and do that baselining. So we can see when we did that sync, it's now pulled in some additional data from structure, including the Gantt start and end times, the progress from structure. If we go, let's go back to the timeline view. If we go to RoadMonk's configuration, we can actually say, hey, don't use our RoadMonk progress, pull progress directly from structure, and it will pull progress from the progress column in structure, and it will also respect any team level overrides you've done for how they do progress, meaning progress will be very nuanced and accurate, and the teams will agree that that is the progress because you can set it up that way. So with that, I'll hand it back to Dan, and I think transition into questions.
Yeah, thank you. Just a comment from me, and then we will transition into questions from there. I get impressed every single time. The two things that came through my head as a person who helps teams and organizations change. First off, all of those changes doesn't impact the tool in which the team is actually working. So you don't wake up the next day and all of a sudden a configuration has changed, something has changed. We're not working in that way. And the other part is, as you're continuously evolving the way you're working, you can do that without having the constraints of a portfolio tool trying to do things. And also, the portfolio office can work its magic without impacting that team, but looking at the data. And so all of those areas are incredible areas of a lot of waste over the years. And this really helps us to get still those results, but get it in an efficient way and without causing those hectic delays that are coming through. We're trying to put a lot of information here. There is a white paper that is being released out. The QR code will get that to you. We'll also send that off to you in just a bit. Clara, do you want to facilitate us and help us through? I know there's a couple of questions that have come in that we can talk about.
Yes, of course. But first, thank you so much, Jeremy and Dan, for this very insightful session. We have a couple of questions. The first one is, what does structure give me that I can already do in advanced roadmaps in Jira?
A lot. We could do a couple hours on structure, but one of the main things it's going to give you is flexibility. The way that structure builds hierarchies and interprets Jira data is much more flexible than what advanced roadmaps offers. It's also going to get you that data portability across at least Tempo's product lines. So you can just take your structure that you know is the right data and plug it into the other products and start using that data to visualize costs and status and so forth. That's a very big topic. So it's also not tied into a very opinionated way of doing project management. Structure is very unopinionated about how you use it.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeremy. The next one is, can you talk more about how we could use Tempo Planner without integrating structure?
Yeah, you can use Tempo Planner on its own. I didn't show the Tempo Planner interface because we're under time constraints here, but Tempo Planner has its own very deep capacity management interface and capabilities. So you can use it to build teams. You can use it to assign work to people, directly to teams. You can plan stuff out in the future. It just added a new capability called Flex Plans, which means you can add items in Planner that aren't yet in Jira to sort of hash out what might happen and then convert it to Jira issues when time is appropriate. So Planner stands on its own as a capacity management tool. And again, from that modularity perspective, you might just start there and get your teams in order and define, get some work flowing, and then maybe bring structure in as really a project management interface into Planner.
All right. Third question, is there a plan in place to implement earned value management for the RoadMonk or Tempo Cloud solution?
That's not something that I've heard about. Earned value management, that's great. I haven't heard anything on our roadmap specifically about that, though.
And I think the question that we could follow up with is what are you trying to look and gain from earned value? A lot of the metrics that we use, a lot of the uses we use around prioritization and return on investment metrics, leading indicators with OKRs and stuff are good usages of earned value in the kind of iterative development world. If it is more on the operations side, then there is solutions that we have built that we can talk about that do earn value outside of the traditional suite of tools.
Perfect. And now a question for Jeremy. What benefit does RoadMonk provide as a data source for structure? Why not just set the plans up in structure and skip the RoadMonk step?
Yeah, I can tell you, coming from structures, it's not a great tool for communicating to leadership and stakeholders. It's the interface and the visualizations are cluttered and can be kind of confusing for people to understand the big picture. RoadMonk was designed from the ground up to really answer that one question. What is going on at the strategic level? And the visuals and the way that it works are all geared towards solving that problem. And really, structure and RoadMonk there's a tension, because to solve one of those problems, you kind of have to unsolve the other problem, whereas structure is really good at dealing with the details. If you did that with RoadMonk, it would undo its very clean and efficient capabilities around communicating the strategy at a high level. So I see them as complementing each other very well. RoadMonk's what structure has always needed, and structure is what RoadMonk has always needed, and now they have a very strong integration.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. That was our last question for today. Thank you so much, Jeremy, Dan, and thank you for all of you that has attended this session today. If you have any other questions, please reach out to eCore after this webinar, and we're also going to send to you the on-demand webinar after the session. Thank you all and have a great week.
Thank you.